Keir Starmer promised to get tough on illegal immigration. He stood before the British public and assured them that he would bring order to the UK's borders. But reality tells a different story. Since taking office, illegal channel crossings have surged to record levels. Labour's soft-touch approach has emboldened criminal gangs, making Britain an even more attractive destination for illegal migration. Instead of strengthening border controls, Starmer has effectively rolled out the welcome mat. The numbers are staggering. Every week, boat after boat arrives on British shores, carrying migrants who know that under Labour, enforcement is weak and consequences are minimal. Instead of taking decisive action, the government ties the hands of border forces, making it nearly impossible to stem the flow. And as crossings increase, so do the profits of human smugglers who exploit Labour's inaction to expand their operations. And what about the Rwanda plan? Scrapped. Starmer chose political posturing over real deterrence. The plan, designed to disincentivize illegal crossings, was dismissed as inhumane. But what's truly inhumane is the chaos that has followed, with thousands risking their lives at sea, knowing Labour will not stop them. Drownings in the Channel continue, and instead of preventing these dangerous crossings, Starmer's government sends more rescue boats, effectively completing the smuggling operation for the criminals who arrange these journeys. Labour also promised to put an end to taxpayer-funded migrant hotels. Yet, here we are. British taxpayers continue to foot the bill for housing illegal migrants while many citizens struggle with the cost of living crisis. Families forced to choose between heating and eating now watch as millions are spent on accommodating those who have broken the law to enter the UK. The backlog in asylum claims grows, further straining resources, while legal loopholes allow failed claimants to stay indefinitely. Meanwhile, working-class communities bear the brunt. Hotels in small towns are turned into migrant shelters overnight, with no consultation, no plan, and no consideration for local residents. Schools, hospitals, and housing services, already stretched thin, are now overwhelmed by an influx of illegal arrivals, all while British citizens are told to wait longer for basic services. Starmer's rhetoric of border control is nothing more than empty words. Britain deserves a government that puts its people first, restores order to its borders, and ends the cycle of illegal migration that threatens the nation's security and stability. Until that happens, the crisis will only deepen, and the British public will be left paying the price for Labour's failure. Labour doesn't want you to know the true scale of illegal immigration. That's why they're fudging the numbers, suppressing key data, and making misleading claims to downplay the crisis. Official reports are carefully worded to hide the full extent of the problem. When the public demands transparency, Labour responds with spin and excuses, blaming others while the crisis spirals out of control. Behind closed doors, ministers scramble to cover up the failures, ensuring that the real figures never see the light of day. Insiders reveal secret meetings between Starmer and pro-immigration lobbyists, raising the question, who is really in charge of Labour's immigration policy? The interests of the British public seem secondary to the demands of these unelected lobbying groups. Instead of enforcing strict border controls, Starmer is quietly taking advice from those who want open borders, undermining national security in the process. And then there's the censorship. Reports have surfaced of Labour MPs actively suppressing data that exposes the burden of illegal immigration on British communities. Whether it's increased crime rates, overwhelmed public services, or housing shortages, Labour doesn't want you to see the damage they're causing. The media, all too willing to toe the party line, avoids asking tough questions. Any dissenting voices are dismissed as scaremongering or xenophobic, silencing legitimate concerns. But look at the reality on the ground. Public services are collapsing under the weight of mass migration. Schools are overcrowded, hospitals are at breaking point, and social housing lists are at record highs. Meanwhile, British taxpayers continue to foot the bill for migrant hotels, while their own communities struggle to make ends meet. Labour promised to fix this, yet things have only gotten worse. The situation in coastal towns is even more alarming. Border Force and lifeboat crews are effectively operating a taxi service for illegal migrants, ferrying them safely to British shores instead of turning them back. Criminal gangs now operate with impunity, knowing there are no real consequences under Starmer's government. The message is clear: if you come illegally, you will be welcomed, housed, and supported, all at the taxpayer's expense. Labour's failure to act is not incompetence, it's a choice. A choice to prioritise ideology over national interest, to ignore the voices of ordinary Britons, and to allow the country's borders to remain wide open. The question is, how much longer will the British people tolerate it? Explosive new revelations suggest Labour's true intentions. Labour is reportedly considering an amnesty for illegal migrants. That's right. Instead of strengthening border security, Starmer's government may be looking to grant legal status to those who entered the UK illegally. What message does this send to criminal gangs and human traffickers? That Britain is a soft touch, that if you cross the channel illegally and stay long enough, you could eventually be rewarded with legal status. Such a policy could encourage even more dangerous crossings, putting lives at risk and increasing pressure on housing, healthcare, and law enforcement. The consequences of such a move would be severe. The UK is already facing an unprecedented housing crisis, with waiting lists for social housing growing longer by the day. Families who have contributed to this country for years are left struggling while resources are diverted elsewhere. An amnesty would only increase demand, making it even harder for British citizens to secure homes. The NHS is already stretched to its limits, with record waiting times, overwhelmed emergency services, and a severe shortage of doctors and nurses. Introducing an amnesty would place even more strain on an already fragile system, potentially making it harder for citizens to access the care they desperately need. And let's talk about public safety. Reports suggest that illegal migration has led to rising crime in some areas, yet Labour refuses to acknowledge these concerns. Granting an amnesty could make it even harder to track those who entered the country unlawfully, creating a security risk that the government seems unwilling to confront. This isn't speculation, it's a real concern for communities across the UK. Critics argue that an amnesty rewards those who break the law while punishing those who followed legal pathways to residency and citizenship. Instead of tackling illegal immigration head-on, Labour's solution seems to be surrender. The question remains, will Labour put the concerns of British citizens first, or will they push forward with a policy that could have lasting consequences for the country? The public deserves answers, but so far, all they're getting is silence. There's something suspiciously familiar about Labour's immigration policies. They align almost perfectly with EU free movement rules. Could it be that Starmer is using immigration as a backdoor to reintegrate Britain into the EU? Leaked reports suggest that Labour has been holding secret talks with EU officials to discuss long-term plans for border control, or the lack thereof. Starmer has already hinted at rejoining EU agencies and aligning with EU regulations. Is the next step removing border controls altogether? The signs are hard to ignore. Labour MPs have consistently opposed strict immigration policies, arguing for closer cooperation with Europe. But what does that really mean? Is it just diplomacy, or is it the first step towards surrendering control of Britain's borders once again? Starmer claims Labour respects Brexit, but their actions tell a different story. Rejoining EU migration schemes, weakening border checks, and restoring closer ties to Brussels would erode the very sovereignty that Brexit was meant to protect. Immigration is just one piece of a much larger puzzle. If Labour continues down this path, Britain could soon find itself shackled once again to Brussels' migration policies, whether the public consents or not. The question is, will the British people allow it, or will they push back before it's too late? Labour has proven time and again that they can't control the borders, and they won't protect British workers. Under Starmer's leadership, the party has failed to address the growing concerns of everyday Brits who are feeling the effects of unchecked immigration. People are starting to wake up to the reality of Starmer's failed policies, and even traditional Labour supporters are beginning to turn against him. Polls across the country are showing a growing dissatisfaction with Labour's approach to immigration. Communities, especially those in the heart of Britain, feel abandoned by a government more interested in appeasing special interest groups than addressing the real concerns of hard-working citizens. As wages stagnate and housing becomes more scarce, frustration is bubbling over. The question now is Starmer lying to the public about his policies? Is he completely incompetent, or is it a dangerous mix of both? The evidence is irrefutable. Labour's immigration policies have not only fueled a crisis at the borders but have also deceived the public with vague promises that failed to materialise. Time after time, we've seen Labour leaders prioritise ideological virtue signalling over the safety and security of the nation. This is no longer a matter of politics, it's a matter of national security, and Britain deserves so much better than this. It's time to ask, is this really the future we want for our country? Where does Starmer's leadership take us? What do you think about Starmer's immigration policy? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more such type of news.